Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are actually stripping everything right back to the basics, but don't let that fool you.
No, definitely don't.
Because we are heading straight into high-yield territory for biology. Specifically, this is tailored for any of you out there prepping for Neet.
Right, yeah. We're tackling the living world today.
Yeah.
And I know, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, chapter 1, I can completely skip this. I mean, I know what a living thing is.
Yeah, I mean, if it breathes and it moves around, it's alive.
Right.
Simple.
And that is exactly how you lose marks on the exam.
Ouch.
I mean it. This chapter, it's actually a minefield of really technical definitions and very specific exceptions. The examiners know that you're going to rely on your gut intuition, so they set these little traps based on strict biological standards.
So our mission today for you listening is to deactivate those traps. We are going to figure out what is technically alive versus what just sort of looks alive.
Exactly.
We're going to decode the naming system so you never lose points on something silly like italics or capitalization. And we're going to tackle that taxonomy table that literally everyone hates memorizing.
Oh yeah, table 1.1. Plus, we will break down the taxonomical aids, specifically the keys, which are, well, they're honestly more like a logic puzzle than a straight biology concept.
But before we get to all those logic puzzles, we really have to pay our respects. We need to take a second to talk about the man who basically wrote the rule book for modern biology, Ernst Mayr.
Yeah, the Darwin of the 20th century. You really cannot skip that intro page of the unit. Mayer's just a titan in the field. He was born in 1904, and he actually lived to be 100 years old.
A literal century of science? That's incredible.
It is. And he didn't just watch it all happen. He shaped it. He made the origin of species diversity the absolute central question of evolutionary biology. But for your exam context, the real golden nugget here is that he pioneered the currently accepted definition of a biological species.
And he won the Triple Crown for it, right?
Yes. That is the specific detail you need to lock into your brain. It's just like a horse race, but, for science nerds. He won the Bolzan Prize in '83, the International Prize for Biology in '94, and then the Crafoord Prize in '99.
Okay, so that's Bolzan, International, Crafoord, the Triple Crown. Got it.
Perfect.
All right, let's get into this first trap you mentioned. Defining life. Because, my intuition says living things grow, therefore growth is a defining property of life.
And your intuition would be wrong.
Man, 0 for 2 today. Okay, walk me through why growth doesn't count.
So think about a sand dune out in the desert. If the wind blows in a certain direction for a week, that dune is going to get bigger. It grows.
Right.
If we define growth purely as just an increase in mass, that mound of sand is technically growing just like you or I do.
Yeah, but that's just piling extra stuff on top. That feels like cheating.
Exactly. It's accretion. In non-living things, growth happens from the outside. But in living things, growth comes from the inside, through cell division, through metabolism.
Okay, so there's a difference in how it happens.
Right. But because non-living objects can increase in mass, biology has to draw a hard line. Growth is a characteristic of life, sure, but it is not a defining property.
Because a true defining property has to have 0 exceptions.
Precisely. It must be present in all living organisms and entirely absent in all non-living things. Growth just fails that test.
Okay, there's a nuance here, though, that I want to clarify for everyone. Because for me, growing taller and, say, having a baby, those are 2 very different things.
Right. So for higher plants and animals, growth and reproduction are mutually exclusive events. You grow up, and then later you reproduce. But think about a bacteria or an amoeba.
Oh, single-celled stuff.
Exactly. For them, cell division is everything. When they divide, they're growing in number, but they're also reproducing at the exact same time. So for unicellular organisms, growth and reproduction are synonymous.
Okay, that makes sense. So growth is out because sand dunes exist. What about reproduction, then? Surely rocks aren't out there having baby rocks.
Very true. But let me ask you this. Does every single living thing reproduce?
Eventually, right? Unless they die first.
What about a mule?
Oh. The donkey-horse hybrid. Right, they are completely sterile.
Mules are sterile. Worker bees are sterile. They never reproduce. And there are plenty of infertile human couples out there, too. Are they not alive?
No, they're definitely alive.
Exactly. So reproduction is a major feature of life. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But because there are living things that simply cannot reproduce, it fails the defining property test, too.
Man, that is tricky. So if growth and reproduction get thrown out, what is actually left? What is the gold standard for defining life?
Metabolism.
The chemical engine.
That's a great way to put it. It's the sum total of all the chemical reactions occurring in the body. No non-living object exhibits metabolism, period.
But hang on a second. I've definitely seen scientists do reactions in a test tube. So is the test tube alive?
That is a really great question. Those are in vitro reactions, literally meaning in glass. Now, the reaction itself is a living reaction because it's the exact same chemistry that happens inside a cell. But the test tube environment isn't a living thing.
So the reaction is biological, but the glass vessel holding it isn't.
Which brings us directly to the real ultimate definition you need for the exam. Cellular organization. You have to have the cell to actually house the metabolism. That is the true defining feature.
Okay, so metabolism and cellular organization are they are the defining properties. What about consciousness?
So this is the most obvious, but also the most technically complicated one. It's the ability to sense your environment and respond to it.
Like a houseplant turning its leaves toward the window to get sun.
Yes, exactly. Or photoperiod. The length of daylight affects seasonal breeders in both plants and animals. Whether you are a tiny prokaryote or a massive complex eukaryote, you are sensing and responding to cues.
So all life is aware of its surroundings on some level.
Correct. But humans are the total outlier here. We are the only organism that is aware of itself. We have self-consciousness.
Which actually leads to a really fascinating kind of dark philosophical question that's mentioned right there in the source material. What about a patient in a coma?
The brain-dead patient.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where biology kind of hits a wall. If a patient is supported by heart-lung machines, they have zero self-consciousness, but their metabolism is still running because of those machines.
So are they living or non-living?
The text actually leaves it open-ended, but strictly speaking, they have lost that key defining property of self-awareness, yet they maintain the metabolic property.
Yeah.
It's this massive gray area that just illustrates how wildly complex life really is.
Before we move on to how we name all these complex things, I need you to explain emergent properties, because I read the definition in the text and it honestly sounded like word salad. It says properties of tissues are not present in the constituent cells.
It sounds dense, but it's actually a beautiful concept. Just think of it like a car.
Okay. I'm picturing a Ferrari.
Nice choice.
Mm.
Now imagine I take that Ferrari completely apart. I put all the pistons in one pile over here, the tires in another pile, the spark plugs in a box. Can any of those individual parts drive?
No, they're just metal and rubber sitting there.
Exactly. The property of driving only emerges when you put them all together and they interact in a specific way. Biology is exactly the same. The mind doesn't exist inside one single isolated neuron. It emerges from the interaction of billions of neurons. Life is what happens between the parts.
Oh, wow. That just clicked for me. That's a great analogy. Okay, so we've defined what life is, but now we have a massive logistical nightmare. The source says there are, what, 1.7 million species?
Between 1.7 and 1.8 million described species, and that sheer number creates total chaos. Because if I call a plant corn here and you call it maize in the UK, or someone else calls it something completely different in India, we simply can't do science together.
So we need a universal language. Enter Carolus Linnaeus and binomial nomenclature.
The system of two names. And we have two major rulebooks to govern this. You need to know these acronyms. The ICBN for plants, which is the International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, and the ICZN for animals, the International Code of Zoological Nomenclature.
Now, I remember getting absolutely hammered on these specific rules in school. There are 4 universal ones, and they are prime territory for exam questions.
They really are. Rule number 1 is all about the look. Biological names are generally in Latin, and they are written in italics.
But why Latin, though? It's a dead language.
That's exactly why we use it. Dead languages don't change over time. It completely prevents modern slang or shifting meanings from creeping in. And if you type the name out, you italicize it to show that Latin origin.
Got it. Rule 2 is the structure itself. The first word is the genus, and the second word is the specific epithet.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
But rule 3 is where students constantly lose marks.
This is exactly where I messed up. I used to write the scientific name by hand on a test and just draw one big long line underneath the whole thing.
Fatal error. When they are handwritten, they must be underlined separately. One distinct line for the genus, a break, and then another line for the species. It proves to the examiner that you understand there are 2 separate components.
And finally, rule 4 is capitalization.
The genus gets a capital letter. The species gets a small letter. So for a mango, Mangifera indica, capital M, small I.
And sometimes you see a little tiny name tacked onto the very end, right? Like Mangifera indica Linn.
Yeah, that's the citation. It just means Linnaeus was the first person to actually describe it.
Okay, so we've officially named the organism. Now we need to file it away. Which brings us to the taxonomic hierarchy.
The ladder of life. We classify things in a series of steps, and each step is called a taxon or taxa plural.
I always used a mnemonic for this ascending order. Keep pot clean or family gets sick. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species.
That works perfectly. But here is the deeper concept you need to actually understand, not just memorize. As you go up that ladder, moving from species all the way up to kingdom, what happens to the similarities between the organisms?
They get way more vague.
Right. The number of common characteristics decreases. A species group is super specific. A kingdom group is incredibly broad.
That makes sense. Members of the same species can breed with each other. But members of a kingdom, well, I'm technically in the same kingdom as a sea sponge, and we really don't have much in common besides just being animals.
Exactly. Lower taxa mean more shared characteristics. Higher taxa mean fewer shared characteristics, which actually makes classifying things much harder the higher up you go.
Let's zoom in on the middle of that ladder for a second. I feel like genus and family are pretty easy to grasp, but order is where it gets kind of murky.
Think of it purely as aggregation. A genus aggregates closely related species together. So the genus Panthera holds the lion, the tiger, and the leopard. But Panthera is different from Felis, which holds your everyday house cat.
But they are all still cats.
So we group them into a family, Felidae. But then cats and dogs are obviously very different, yet they both eat meat. So we aggregate the families Felidae and Canidae into the order Carnivora.
Oh, you're just zooming out at each step.
Precisely. And for plants, it's a very similar process. You have the potato family, Solanaceae. It gets grouped with the morning glory family, Convolvulaceae, into the order Polymonialis.
Based on what, though? Leaves.
Actually, mainly based on floral characters. Flowers are the most stable part of the plant for classification purposes.
Okay, I want to tackle Table 1.1 now. This is that massive chart in the chapter that lists the full hierarchy for man, housefly, mango, and wheat. It is an absolute nightmare to memorize if you just stare blankly at it.
So don't just stare at it. Look for the hidden patterns.
Let's start with the plants first. Mango and wheat. I noticed something specific about the suffixes when I was reading.
Yes. This is your ultimate cheat code for the exam. Look at the family names. Mango is Anacardiaceae. Wheat is Poaceae.
They both end in ACEE.
Correct. For plants, the family usually ends in that AC suffix. Now look at the orders. Sapindales for mango, Poace for wheat.
They end in ALES.
So if you see a word ending in ales on a multiple choice test, you immediately know it's likely a plant order. If it ends in aceae, it's a plant family. That alone cuts your memorization in half.
That is so helpful. Okay, but the animals aren't quite so kind with their spelling. Let's look at the housefly. Musica domestica.
This is a classic examiner trap. Students always mix up the class and the order for the housefly.
Is it because the words sound similar?
No, it's because they are kind of counterintuitive to how we talk normally. The phylum is Arthropoda, meaning jointed legs. The class is Insecta, but the order is Diptera.
Diptera, meaning two wings.
Right. Do not flip those two. Insecta is the class, Diptera is the order, and for the family, it's Musidae.
And then there's us, humans, Homo sapiens.
We are in the family Hominidae, but the order is Primata. We are primates.
Okay, so quick recap for you listening. Plants have suffix rules, ales for order, aceae for family. Houseflies are Diptera for order and Insecta for class. And humans are primates.
You've got it.
All right, we are in the final stretch here. We have defined life, we've named it, and we've organized it into a hierarchy. Now, how do we actually study it? We need the taxonomical aids.
Think of these A's as the working biologist's toolkit. We essentially have places to store dead things and places to keep living things.
Let's do dead things first. The herbarium.
This is basically a massive library for plants, but instead of books, you have dried, pressed plant specimens that are carefully glued onto standard sheets of paper.
Is it just an art gallery to look at?
No, it's a highly organized data bank. The most important part is actually the label down in the corner. It tells you the exact date, the place of collection, local names, botanical names, the family, and the name of the collector. It serves as a quick referral system for scientists.
And then we have museums, which you usually see in schools or colleges.
Right. Jars of specimens floating in preservatives, stuffed birds, skeletons. And don't forget the insect boxes. The rule there is collect, kill, pin.
Sounds a bit violent. Let's move to the living ones, Botanical Gardens and Zoological Parks.
These are your living reference libraries. Places like Kew Gardens in England or the Indian Botanical Garden in Howrah. You go there to see the actual living plant, which will be scientifically labeled. And zoos, obviously, are for studying wild animal behavior and food habits in a protected environment.
Now, the last one is the one that trips literally everyone up. The key.
The key is definitely the most technical aid we have.
To me, when I read about it, it just sounds like one of those choose-your-own-adventure books.
That is the absolute perfect analogy. Imagine you have a completely unknown creature sitting in your hand. The key gives you a choice, which is called a couplet.
A couplet, like a pair of something.
Right. It asks a question based on contrasting characters. Does it have wings? Yes or no? That pair of contrasting options is the couplet. You have to actively accept one and reject the other.
Okay, so I choose, yes, it has wings.
That specific choice, that statement you just accepted, is called a lead, because it quite literally leads you down the path to the next couplet.
And I just keep following the leads until I finally identify the creature.
Exactly. It's a step-by-step logic path. And the phrase you absolutely need to remember for the exam is this. Keys are generally analytical in nature. You are constantly analyzing differences.
Analytical. Got it. And real quick, the source material also mentions flora, manuals, and monographs.
Just think of those as the index cards. Flora is the specific account of habitat and distribution for a given area. Manuals help you identify names of species found in an area. And monographs. Well, mono means one. It's comprehensive information on any one specific taxon.
Boom. From the deep philosophy of consciousness all the way down to the suffixes of wheat. We really covered a lot of ground today.
We did. And I really hope you listening can see that this isn't just a random list of facts you have to memorize. It's a cohesive system. We define life by its internal cellular organization. We name it using Latin to keep it entirely universal. And we organize it into a hierarchy just to understand the relationships.
And we use keys and herbariums to keep track of all that data.
Exactly. It's all about bringing scientific order to natural chaos.
I want to leave everyone with that thought about the coma patient again as a sort of final takeaway. We spent all this time today rigidly defining what is living, but the line is so much blurrier than we initially think.
It really is. I mean, if you strip away self-consciousness, are we just metabolic machines kept running by other machines? It's a profound question. And because all organisms share common genetic material to varying degrees, we are all linked to that same definition. But for your exam, definitely stick to the textbook definitions we covered.
Sound advice. Watch out for those traps, especially the growth exception. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Good luck with your prep, everyone. You've got this.